You were raised to be a square. One of the main facets of being a square is naivety, being naive. There's different archetypes of naivety that you see in movies. And one of the main archetypes of naivety when it comes to a male archetype is a nerd, which is why I chose the archetype. And you have the nerd juxtaposed with the bad boy archetype, which that archetype is uh, colored by a man who is uh, he's flavored by the darkness inside of him, and that he is aware of the darker aspects of life. Whereas a nerd, he's kind of more of a sucker, someone who can be fooled quite easily. Yes, he's very intelligent, but he's not cunning. Um, so the idea of a person being raised to be a square is a person being raised to be unaware of the nature of people, the nature of humans, the darker aspects of it. Um, there are aspects of humanity that aren't really all that fun to know about. And I think parents do themselves a disservice when they teach their children everything else but the darker aspects of humanity. You see this in women and how they raise their sons. Um, Many times they raise their sons uh, without the understanding of the true nature of women and how dark they are towards men, and you know um, just how they operate in the dating realm. And they'll raise their sons with a lack of boundaries. They'll do things to lower his aggression. Um, they will emphasize that he shows emotions, and this makes him more susceptible and makes him a target. He becomes passive aggressive, kind of like his mom. Uh, Develops a fear of abandonment. They develop an anxious attachment. Uh, they end up becoming codependent because of their over reliance on their mother, because their mother doesn't want them to get the traits. A lot of these traits come because the mother doesn't want the son to grow into the natural traits of masculinity, because she wants to have a son who will just linger around her. She doesn't want a son who will eventually be able to get a girlfriend. And so uh, she kind of destroys a lot of these traits before they even manifest, either consciously or unconsciously. But then the boy grows up, later when he's rejected by women, and he actually realizes where this is coming from. When he finds out the source, um, he can become extremely resentful, extremely angry. This could even turn into hatred. Um, Many times, guys are accused of being misogynist. Um, a lot of those guys were raised by their mothers. They weren't raised by fathers. Um, and the resentment that comes from their existence is that they weren't able to be successful with the opposite sex, and they were kind of they were sabotaged, and they didn't know this, and this could have been for decades at a time. And they didn't realize that women were attracted, specifically to certain traits, and they didn't know all the proclivities and tendencies that women liked in men, and and their dating patterns. They didn't know that women like nonchalant men. They didn't know that women like men with very strong boundaries, who aren't afraid of showing those boundaries. Men who are ambitious and men who have a dark side. Uh, and a lot of these women that raise their sons like that, they, they don't have husbands, and they want someone to take care of them in their old age, and they don't want their sons to just go off and get with a girlfriend and just have their own life. Well, maybe they do want them to have their own life, but I guess perhaps it's selfishness that would create something like this. You see a similar dynamic with fathers. Fathers do something very similar. They kind of raise their daughters to be self-reliant, thinking that it's a good thing. Um, My ex's mother, she was raised to be very self-reliant, but she didn't really know how to be feminine. And so a lot of her dating life was very tragic and sad. And there wasn't really a lot of she didn't really know how to be a woman in the feminine sense. She, and the fathers mean well, perhaps some of them, but it's kind of the same thing. They end up sabotaging their daughters, and their daughters don't know how to do something like a very specific important skill. Uh, but specifically for the son, this could mean that he wouldn't be able to attract the opposite sex because his whole life has been kind of stacked uh, to create this situation where he repels the women as opposed to attracting the women his way. Um, it's a painful thing, and I'm speaking from experience and building back from this and learning how to actually be attractive and learning the traits that were already there. They were already A lot of the traits were already there, and they were just beaten out of you. They were beaten out of men. Same for women. The traits were there. It's just uh, we seem to have this bad habit of trying to change the human condition. Um, More in the future. You were raised to be a square.